Greetings and welcome back to 303 in Junior English. We now turn to three Harlem Renaissance poets as they are listed for you on page 920, 921. We're going to begin first of all with Claude Mckay. Let's read a little about him on 920 and then we'll do his poem, The Tropics in New York. Notice their dates here, 1890 to 1948. In some ways, poet and novelist Claude Mckay seemed to be a man without roots. Once while traveling overseas, he wrote to Langston Hughes, quote, "I write of America as home, although I'm really a poet without a country," end quote. Born in Jamaica, he lived in numerous places in the United States and overseas. However, Mckay considered Harlem his spiritual home, and it was to Harlem he returned in both his life and his work. The son of Jamaican farm workers, Mckay was able to immigrate to the United States when his first collection of poems, Songs of Jamaica, 1912, won an award from the Institute of Arts and Letters. Mckay moved to Harlem in 1914 after studying at Tuskegee Institute and Kansas State Teachers College. In 1917, Mckay published two sonnets, The Harlem Dancer and Invocation. Mckay's poetry focused largely on the social injustices experienced by blacks in America. However, poems like The Tropics in New York, the poem we're going to study, are also marked by nostalgia for his homeland, Jamaica, a feeling echoed in the title of his autobiography, A Long Way from Home, 1937. Let's turn to quickly page 922, and let's take a look at the literary analysis information there and put this at 2B. For each of the three poems that we'll study, we'll be paying attention to this. A stanza, make sure you write that word down at 2B. A stanza is a group of lines that forms a division of a poem. Often, like paragraphs in prose, each stanza develops a single main idea that adds to a poem's overall meaning. Stanza structure, another term that I hope you get at 3B. Stanza structure refers to the way a poet organizes stanzas, which may vary in length or be evenly ordered. Types of stanzas are identified by the number of lines they contain. So, for example, 2 lines stanza is a couplet, 6 lines is a sestet, 4 lines is a quatrain, and 8 lines is an octave. A sonnet is a 14-line poem that follows one of 2 stanza structures. A Petrarchian sonnet, such as From the Dark Tower, is divided into an opening octave followed by a sestet. A Shakespearean sonnet is divided into 3 quatrains and a final couplet. As you read these poems, notice how each poet uses stanza structure to develop his ideas. And then the other observation here is that these poems contain similar types of imagery or word pictures that appeal to the senses. As you read, compare each poet's use of imagery to express meaning and emotions. Under reading strategy, we're going to apply a political approach to literary criticism, which allows you, the reader, to interpret a work for its political content and themes. Writers may state political ideas directly or use symbols and other literary devices to suggest political meanings, as these poets do. You'll understand these poems better if you read them for the political messages that they express. And then you've got a chart there to help you. You've also got 4 vocab words at the bottom of 922 that are important for the examination that's coming. All right, let's go ahead and turn now to the first of 3 poems we'll be studying, the Claude Mckay offering, The Tropics in New York. Do note the background information. This poem is marked by nostalgia for Jamaica, where the poet was born and raised. Let's turn now to a reading of the poem on page 923. We have professional reader. Just follow along and then be ready to work with level 1. Tropics in New York.
The Tropics in New York by Claude Mckay. Bananas ripe and green and ginger root, cocoa in pods and alligator pears, and tangerines and mangoes and grapefruit, fit for the highest prize at parish fairs. Set in the window, bringing memories of fruit trees laden by low-singing rills, and dewy dawns, and mystical blue skies, in benediction over nun-like hills. My eyes grew dim, and I could no more gaze. A wave of longing through my body swept, and hungry for the old familiar ways, I turned aside and bowed my head and wept.
Okay, let's just start now at level 1 and just quickly do a level 1 summary of this poem. Of course, we have a speaker standing, as our title tells us, in New York City. He's looking through a window, or she's looking through a window, the speaker of the poem. and seeing what? So write that down. What is it that the speaker sees through the through the window or whatever? And then what is it that is the response to what it is that the speaker sees? Of course, what the speaker sees is listed right there for you in stanza 1. Bananas ripe and green, and ginger root, coca in pods, and alligator pears. Your footnote tells you we're talking avocados, and tangerines, and mangoes, and grapefruit. Wow. So in other words, the poet looks at the display of a bunch of fruit, and the speaker of the poem does, and how does it make the speaker feel? Well, let's say two things. One, second stanza. Notice we've got 4 lines for each of our stanzas, right? So we're talking here, we've got quatrains. Notice the end rhyme at 2b. We'll point that out in a little bit. But notice we're told, first of all, nostalgia. Like, man, I miss home, Jamaica. And then in the last stanza, my eyes grew dim and I could no more gaze at the fruit. A wave of longing through my body swept, and hungry for the old familiar ways. Not hungry for the fruit, but hungry for the old familiar ways. I turned aside and bowed my head and wept. Homesick. The longing to be back home. Where? In Jamaica. Ergo the tropics, right? So here this speaker is trapped in New York City, wishing that he or she could be somewhere else. Okay, let's jump now to 2a really quickly and ask about possible messages or themes. Let's list several. 1, we have mentioned this before several times, that in the 20th century, lots and lots of poets, from W.H. Auden's Unknown Citizen to T.S. Eliot's Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, you have lots and lots of statements of, let's put it in our notes as this way, alienation, dislocation. The feeling that somehow you don't belong where you are, that somehow you wish you could be elsewhere. Here in this case, you have a situation where you've got a speaker standing in New York City wishing that he or she could be in Jamaica in the tropics. Why? Well, because maybe that's where that individual is from. A wave of longing through my body swept. Okay. Number 2, a second message or theme. It is hard to be away from home. It is hard to not have the things you love next to you. To be in a foreign place and to feel a foreigner is hard. Finally, number 3, nostalgia message, third message. Nostalgia, or a longing for the way it used to be, can often lead one to sorrow, to be really sad. Let's jump to 2b really quickly. Notice how you have structure in this poem. Stanza structure of quatrains. You have 3 stanzas of 4 lines each. Notice your in rhyme. Root, fruit, pears, fairs. Right? And on and on and on it goes. Right? Okay? Now all of this is designed intentionally to set us up, of course, for the final statement in the final 3rd stanza that tells us that the speaker of the poem is sad to be stuck in New York City and not home in Jamaica. Nostalgia, again, is our word. Let's jump to level 3 and 3a. What is the way that we can relate this to other titles that we are familiar with? We've already mentioned several already. Texts of alienation. What is for you your song of dislocation? What is for you your song that reminds you sometimes when you are lonely or you're alienated, that somehow helps you to get through that? Do you have a song in your playlist when you're feeling lonely, when you're feeling sad, that you kind of can listen to and it somehow helps you? Write down that song really quickly. What is for you a film about a dislocated person? A person, for example, who is in one world but really would like to be in another place, somehow set apart. Let's talk really quickly now about 3b and how we can personally relate to a title like this. What is for you the last time you were really homesick? Do you remember that? What was that like for you? And how did you overcome it if you did overcome it? Some students at Worland High School have spent their whole life in this community and grown up here. Other students at Worland High School transferred in. One of the things those students will say as they transfer in, especially if they came in as a freshman or a sophomore or even as a junior at Worland High School, they will say, coming into this small community is very hard when you are from the outside. It's hard. You long to be elsewhere, back home. This seems like a very foreign place. What's the best way to deal with homesickness? What's the best way to deal with being away? Of course, the other question is, you're just a few months away from graduating from high school, and you're going to have to answer this really interesting question. Where do you go after you graduate? By that I mean the following. You have two options. One, you leave this community. Two, you stay in this community. What if you leave this community? How will you deal with issues of homesickness, of being away from the place that you know? Sometimes it's not always the place you love, but it's the place you know. And because it's the place you know, it's the place where you feel more comfortable if you are away from it. Well, there you go. Claude Mckay's The Tropics in New York. Thank you.